Hi and welcome. My name is Julianne Cost, and in the next few minutes we're going to take a look at how we can add Lightroom Mobile to our Lightroom Classic workflow. I'm going to begin in Lightroom Classic on the desktop, and the first thing I need to do is click on the cloud icon in order to start syncing. Once I've started syncing, I can then create a collection and add files in order to sync them. On the left-hand side, I'll click on the plus icon and choose to create a collection. I'll give it a name. I don't want to include the selected photo, but I do want to set it as my target collection. This is going to make it easier for me to add images to it. I'll click Create, and we can see that it's been created in the Collections panel. Now to quickly add some images, under the folder area, I'm going to do a search for all of my folders that contain Point Lobos. I'll select the first one, and then to quickly add the images, I'll pick up my Painter tool, set it to Target Collection, and then simply click on the images that I want to add to the collection. I can move to another folder, and then click to add some additional images. We can see that I now have 12 images in that collection, so I'll put back the Painter tool, target the collection, and then in order to sync it with the cloud, I'll click on the empty well to the left of the name. So as soon as I sync a collection, Lightroom Classic is going to automatically create a smart preview. Now, a smart preview is a smaller version of the original file. It's 2,540 pixels on the long dimension, and it's going to retain all of the flexibility of my raw files, but it's going to be a fraction of the size. And Lightroom's going to sync that smart preview to the mobile device. And I want to be very clear, it's not syncing the original file. Therefore, syncing through Lightroom Classic is really not a backup solution. It's just syncing a smart preview of that file. All right, if I move back to the collections and click on the search icon here, you can see that I can search by all of my synced collections. I just want to point out that I have a number of different collections that have already been synchronized. All right, I'll return to looking at all of my collections, and then I'm going to remove my search on my folders. I'll go down to the image vault to 2021. I have some images here of some smoke, and I just want to point out that I can also select images and drag them directly to all synced photographs in order to sync them. So I don't necessarily have to create a collection, but for me it's a little bit easier to create that just to keep things organized. All right, now let's switch over to Lightroom on my mobile device. Now the first thing that you'll want to do is you'll want to go to the App Store for your device and download the Adobe Lightroom Photo Editor. You're going to need to sign in with your Adobe ID, and Lightroom will ask you if you want to add new photos from your camera roll, along with some other questions like can it have access to the camera and to the location information, as well as push notifications. So once you've stepped through those questions and answered them, there are 4 primary areas to the app. The library is where you're going to organize and edit your images. The shared area is where you can see images that you've shared with other people. The Learn tab has a number of different step-by-step tutorials, and in the Discover area you can be inspired by other photographers' edits, and I would encourage you to explore all of these on your own. For now, I'll return to the library, and we're going to start with the All Photos view. If I tap on it, we can see all of the different photos that I have synchronized. I can tap on an image and then swipe to move from one image to the next. In order to zoom in, I can double tap to zoom to 100% and then reposition the image. Double tap again will zoom out, or I can use a spread or pinch to zoom in or out, and then again double tap to zoom out. Now if I want to see more information about an image, I can use a 2-finger tap. Here I can toggle through some information in the upper left about the image, and if I 2-finger tap again, we can see a histogram. 2-finger tap again will toggle that off. We can also use the More icon, which is the three dots icon in the upper right, in order to select the View options, where I can show the info overlays by tapping on the icon and toggle between the info and the histogram. All right, for now I will toggle those off and then a single tap in order to hide the screen. And I can do a single finger tap again to hide the interface and then tap again to bring it back. All right, let's use the chevron in the upper left in order to return to grid view. Across the top, we have a number of different icons, including a search icon. I'll tap on that, and then I'll just start typing in the word ice. We can see that there are a number of tags that I can select that it's suggesting, or we can actually search through the image content in order to find any images that Lightroom finds using Adobe Sensei's artificial intelligence and machine learning. All right, let's hide that. We could also do a search for something like green. If we were just looking for a green image, search on that, and Lightroom would show us all of our images where the primary subject matter is in fact green. All right, I'll toggle that off and then tap done. The second icon there is the filter icon. When I tap that, you can see I can filter by my star ratings that I've applied to my images, or perhaps any of my flags. I can also choose to filter by the type of image as well as the camera that I use to capture the image. If I've enabled tagging for people, I can use that, location, keyword, and whether or not the images are edited. So we can see it's very easy to find and filter our images on mobile. Next to the filtering, we've got a little bell icon. That will show me any activity if I share my images. Next to that, we have the cloud icon, which will give me the status of my synced images. And this little gear icon right here, if you ever want to go to settings, it will always take you there. All right, let's tap the X mark there, and then we'll use the More icon to show some additional options for all photos. I'm going to choose segmentation because sometimes when you have a lot of photographs that are synced, it might be easier to segment them to move through them more quickly. There are a number of different time segments I can choose from. So for example, I could select months. And now we can see that Lightroom has segmented all of my images by month. In order to see additional images, we can just tap in the disclosure triangle. It'll go ahead and reveal those, and then we can just tap that again in order to hide them. I'll return to the More icon to segmentation. We can also segment by flags, star ratings, as well as file types. But for now, I'll tap None and return to our All Photo view. There are view options in this grid view as well. I can do a two-finger tap to cycle through all of the different overlays. And I can use a 45-degree pinch in order to change the thumbnail size, either making it smaller or making it larger. Of course, I can return to the More icon, and I can also use the view options here in order to show the different overlays or toggle them off entirely. And I can choose the small, normal, or large thumbnail size. All right, let's tap on that chevron again to return to the library. Lightroom creates several auto-generated folders, and I can tap the disclosure triangle by all photos in order to preview them. So we can see any of the images that I've captured using the Lightroom camera, as well as images that have been recently added or recently edited, the people view, as well as deleted images. If I tap on deleted, we can see all of the images here that I've deleted, and I can actually recover them for up to 60 days. So if I just tap to select an image, I could then use the restore button at the bottom in order to restore it or to permanently delete it. In this case, I'll tap restore to restore the photo to all photos and any albums it was previously in. All right, let's go ahead and hide those auto-generated folders, and below that we can see all of our different albums. So in Lightroom Classic on the desktop, we created what was called a collection, but they're known as albums on Lightroom Mobile. If I scroll down, we can even see that Point Lobos collection that we created in Lightroom on the desktop. Now we can also create our own albums here on mobile, and they will sync back to Lightroom Classic as a collection. To do so, I think the easiest way is to tap on the plus icon and then choose Album. I'll give it a name, in this case Smoke, and then tap OK. Now in order to add images to this new album, I'll return to All Photos, and then scroll up to the top and then down just a little bit where we can see those smoke images. Now to select them, I can either tap on the More icon and then choose Select, and then tap on an image to select it. Or if your phone supports it, you can tap and hold in order to select your first image, and then tap on additional images to select them. Down at the bottom, I'll tap the Add To in order to add these to an album. Scroll down to that smoke album and target it, and then tap the Add in order to add those to the collection. When we return to the library and scroll down, we can see those 8 images have been added. Now, 3 important things to keep in mind. Even after you move the photos to an album, you can always find them in the All Photos area. And you can put the same photo in multiple albums. You can just select the images and then choose Add To, and then select another album. For now, I'll cancel out of there and then tap Done. And third, if you make an edit to an image, the edits will be made across all of the albums, as well as sync to Lightroom Classic on the desktop. There are a few more album options that I want to point out. If we tap the More icon to the right of an album, we can add photos from a number of different sources, including from all photos, from our camera roll, from files, and even from a camera device. This means that you can attach or connect your camera memory card, or compatible USB media to your device and access and import photos, including raw images, to Lightroom Mobile. In addition, I can auto add from camera roll, so anytime an image goes into the camera roll on my phone, it would automatically add it into Lightroom. I can store an album locally if I know that I'm going to be offline and won't have access to the internet and want to work on my images. We can share and invite albums, which we'll talk more in depth about later. I can move albums, rename, clear the cache if my device is running low on space, and also delete an album. We can also change the sort order from an album. I'll tap on the 3 lines next to the plus, and you can see that I can sort by date created, the name, the photo count, or if they're locally stored. Excellent. Next, we're going to take a look at how we edit images on Lightroom Mobile. So just like in Lightroom Classic, we can make incredible enhancements to our images. And everything that you do on mobile is going to sync back to Lightroom Classic. I'm going to use a long press to just show a before and after, so we can see we can do our tonal and color adjustments. We can also do our optics or our lens correction, as well as our perspective correction. We can convert our images to grayscale, as well as apply selective coloring effects. We have all of our local adjustments that we can also use to make changes. And we can even apply presets and vignettes. We can add different profiles to get different looks or add styles to our images. And this is the image that I just want to walk through. So here's before and after. Now, actually the image was cropped, so I'll just swipe to this version instead. So let's begin in the optics panel. I want to remove chromatic aberration as well as enable lens correction. And if necessary, I could move to the geometry panel, where I could use any of the different upright modes to correct perspective, or I could drag out my own guides. But in an image like this, I don't need that, so I'll go ahead and tap Done. I just want to make sure that you're aware that all of those features are here. I'm going to move to the crop options. I want to stick with the 3:2 aspect ratio, but I want to flip it. So in the upper left, I'll tap in order to change the orientation. And then I'll just reposition the crop marquee. We could also rotate the crop as needed or resize it. But for now, I'll leave it right here and tap the check mark in order to apply that. There's also the auto correction feature, so I can just tap auto. And if at any point in time you don't like what you've just done, you can tap the undo icon across the top. Now, if I want to make adjustments that have to do with exposure, I will tap the light panel. We can see I have exposure, contrast, highlight, shadows, whites, and blacks. I'm going to use a 2-finger tap once and twice so that I can see my histogram. And then I'm going to increase my shadows and decrease my highlights. I'll use the white slider to set my white point and the black slider to bring down my black point. If I needed to, I could use the contrast and exposure sliders, and you don't have to tap and drag on the slider itself. You can tap anywhere on the slider in order to move the slider in smaller increments. Next, I'll move to the color panel where I can change the temperature as well as the tint sliders. If I ever need to reset a slider, I can just double tap on it. I can move to vibrance or saturation, but if I want to change a color range independently of another, then I'll move to the color mixer. Here I can either select one of the different color ranges and then use the hue, saturation, or luminance sliders to make changes, or I can tap on the targeted adjustment tool and choose from hue, saturation, or luminance. In this case, I want to lighten the green area, so I'll tap and drag up. You can see there's actually a lot of yellow in the area that I wanted to target. When I'm finished, I just tap to put the tool away and then tap done. I'll just point out you can also do color grading as well as convert an image to black and white. And there's even a white balance eyedropper. Just tap on that and then you can reposition it in the image area. When you lift your finger, it would auto white balance in that area. All right, I'll tap the check to apply that. And let's move over to effects where we can access the texture as well as clarity and dehaze sliders. Now, instead of applying clarity and dehaze globally to this image, I actually want to move to my selective edits. So I'll tap selective, tap the plus icon, grab my adjustment brush, and then tap and drag up or down to change the size of the brush. I can also change the feather on the brush as well as the flow of the brush. You can see across the top, it's actually going to give you the numeric value when you make these changes. All right, I want to add the dehaze in the waterfall, so I'm just going to use my finger to paint over that area. I'll tap on effects and then increase the dehaze. To add another adjustment, I'll tap the plus icon again. This time I'll switch to the linear gradient and then tap and drag down from the top. We can drag further if we want a longer gradient, or we can drag to make it shorter, and we can tap on the center line if we want to rotate it. In this case, I want to darken down the top of the image, so I'll tap on the light edit stack and then just decrease the exposure slightly. All right, let's make one more adjustment. I'll tap the plus, return to the adjustment brush, and I want to lighten the rocks in the foreground. So I'll start painting, but then I will use a 2-finger spread in order to zoom in and paint over this area a little bit more. Then I'll tap on light and just increase the exposure. In order to apply that, I'll tap on the check mark and then double tap to zoom out. I'm going to 2-finger tap in order to hide the histogram. And if there were any distracting elements like this area right up here that I wanted to remove, I could tap on healing. Again, change the size of the brush, paint over the area that I want to replace, and Lightroom will go ahead and find a different source. Now we can adjust that source by just zooming out and then dragging to a different position as needed. I'll tap the check mark in order to apply that. And finally, to add a small vignette, I'll return to Effects, scroll down a bit, decrease the vignette, so to darken the edges, increase the midpoint, and also increase the feather. I'll do a 1-finger tap to hide the interface, double tap to zoom out, and then tap and hold to show a before and after. Now, if you have a lot of images that you want to edit, I just want to point out there are some ways to make your workload a little bit more efficient. The first would be by using this previous button. So let's say, for example, I went to the next image. It's fairly similar. If I wanted to apply those exact same effects, I could just tap previous. I can choose adjustments, which includes all of the adjustments excluding cropping, or all, which would also include cropping from that previous image. Now, because on the phone there isn't a film strip, if the image that you want to apply the previous settings to isn't adjacent, meaning you can't just move from one image to the next, you would want to return to grid view and then select your image. Now, in this case, I don't want to apply the exact same settings. I want a little bit more control, so I'll return to the image that we just edited. I'll tap the More icon and then select Copy Settings. Now I can select from a number of different options. I can use the Select menu to quickly select all of the different settings, or we can go in and select Modified, Default, or None. That's going to be a better starting point because all I want to copy is the vignette, which is found under Effects. So I'll tap on the arrow here, choose Vignette, and then return to Copy Settings and tap the check mark. I can then move to any image, tap the More icon, and tap Paste Settings to paste that vignette. You can also apply as well as create presets. So let's move to the next image. I'll tap on Presets, and we can choose from any of the default presets or select any that we may have created. In this case, I have some grayscale presets. I want to make this look more vintage, so I'll go ahead and apply that preset. If I wanted to create a preset, I could tap the More icon and then choose to create a preset. Again, I can go in and be as specific as I want by turning on and off all of the individual sliders. For now, I'll just tap the X mark, but it's great to know you can make a preset. Now, I also want to mention versions. So versions in Lightroom on mobile enable you to capture all of the settings that have been applied to an image and save them as a single state for that image so that you could try different options. However, versions are not going to sync with Lightroom Classic, so you need to decide if you want to use them or not. If you wanted to create a version, you would just tap the versions and then tap Create Version. You could give it a name. I'll call it Vintage, and then tap Create. And the nice thing here is that I can quickly return to my original or move to this version and apply it at any time. And the reason I say that's very convenient is because in Lightroom on mobile, there isn't a history panel like there is in Lightroom Classic. So this makes it very easy to go back and forth to specific states in your image. All right, next let's talk about album covers and custom sort orders, because when you view your albums in the library here, you can see that Lightroom has automatically created a cover image for all of them. If we want to change that, you simply need to navigate to the image that you want to use as the cover and then tap on the More icon, tap Organize, and then Set as Album Cover. Now when we return to the library, we can see it has a new album cover. Another thing that you'll definitely want to know about, if you've taken the time in Lightroom Classic to create a custom sort order for your images in a collection, you'll want to be able to see that custom sort order in your album on Lightroom Mobile. To do so, just tap on the collection, tap on the More icon, and underneath the Sort By, there's an option for Custom. By default, it'll come in as Capture Date, but you can always select Custom. You can also reorder these by tapping on Edit, and then tapping and then dragging to reorder and set a new custom sort order. When you tap Done and return to the library, the custom sort order will be synchronized with Lightroom Classic. Now, if you wanted to add some star ratings, flags, and info to your photos, you could do so in either all photos or within a collection. Once I tap on an image, in the upper left where it says Edit, I can change that to Rate and Review, in which case I can either tap a star rating down at the bottom or the reject, or the pick flag, or I can use speed rating. On the left side of the image, if I tap and drag up or down, it will increase or decrease the number of stars. And if I tap and drag up on the right side, I can pick an image or drag down to reject it. I'll leave it unflagged for now. There's also an option for activity. If you share images and people comment on them, it will be listed here. You can also add keywords. Now we can see the keywords that have been applied in Lightroom Classic, but a word of warning, if you add another keyword on mobile, it is not going to sync back to Lightroom Classic. And under info, we can go ahead and add a title and a caption. We can also rate and flag our images here, as well as see more information from the EXIF data in the image itself. All right, let's go ahead and return to edit. And next we're going to talk about sharing and exporting photos. Now we can share single photos or we can share entire albums of images. Let's take a look at sharing a single photo. I'll just navigate to the photo that I want to share and tap the share icon. At the top, the share to, that is going to allow me to export and share this to another application, maybe like Square Ready or Instagram. I can also choose to get a link or invite people, in which case Lightroom will create a link for that image, which I can then share with others. But we'll talk more about these settings in just a moment when I share an album. I also have the option to export to the camera roll, to export to files, to share my edit as a discovery post, or to export as. If you want additional options, this is where you should go to pick the different file formats. You can choose from different dimensions as well as image quality. You can even include a watermark. If I tap Customize, I can resize as well as reposition the watermark. You can see that it's set to text right now, but if I change this to graphic, then I can navigate and find a logo that I can use. In this case, I've selected a PNG file that supports transparency, and then I can reposition this as needed and change all of the other options. If I ever want to toggle this off, I just disable it here. There are additional options as well. For example, you can choose whether or not you want to include metadata such as a camera and camera raw information, as well as location information. And you can change the file name, the amount of sharpening, and the color space. So that's really when you're exporting a single image. If I wanted to export an entire album or collection, I think the easiest way is to just tap on the More icon and choose Share and Invite. Here we can see that Lightroom has created a unique URL, which if I want to copy to the clipboard, I can tap on the clipboard. For now, I want to take a look at the other options. So for link access, I can choose invite only or anyone can view. I can then tap invite people and enter in an email address to invite them directly, and again choose whether or not they can only view or if they can also contribute images to this album. Below that, we have a number of different link settings, again revolving around metadata, location information, allowing comments and likes, and allowing a download of the file in the JPEG format. And finally, we can customize the display here, so we can change the name and the author. We can also choose from the different themes, as well as a light or dark appearance. I'll go ahead and tap the check mark there. Now that I've shared this, it will appear underneath the shared area. And in fact, if I tap on the More icon and tap Share and Invite, I'll tap the link and we can preview what this would look like online. So when you send someone the link, this is what they're going to be viewing. They can tap on the individual images, tap the eye icon for more information, or tap to add a comment. One thing to note, they will need to be signed in to either add a comment or tap on the heart icon in order to like the image. Okay, let's return back to Lightroom. If you ever wanted to stop sharing, you can just tap on the stop sharing option down at the bottom. For now, I'll tap cancel and then tap the check mark and return to the library. All right, the next thing I want to cover is how to capture images in Lightroom Mobile. So there's a blue button in the lower right when you're in the library. If you tap on the icon on the left, you can add photos to Lightroom, either from all photos, from the camera roll, from files, or like I mentioned before, if you plug in a card or your camera directly from the device. But on the right-hand side is the camera icon, and I'll tap that to access the options. Now, there are different modes in the lower left. The auto is the most automatic, but you can also change to professional, HDR, or choose from 2 different technology previews, which we'll talk about in just a moment. So while we're in automatic, up along the top where it says DNG, you can choose to either capture as DNG, which is the raw file format, or as a JPEG. I'm going to leave it set to DNG. We have some options for the flash, as well as additional options for aspect ratios, as well as a self-timer. We've got some options for grids and levels, and a highlight clipping warning. Down here at the bottom, we've got some different presets that you can use to shoot with. You can also lock the exposure as well as change the different lenses. If I move to professional, now we have a number of additional options, including exposure, shutter speed or seconds, ISO, white balance, focus, and the ability to reset. And all of these, you can drag the slider and you can see those green highlights telling you what's in focus. And across the top, it actually gives you the percentage. Or for example, if you were in ISO, it would give you the ISO values. You can double tap on any of these at any time to reset a single setting, or tap on reset in order to reset them all. And at any time, you can tap to focus on a specific area, or you can tap and drag left or right in order to change the exposure. Again, I'll just double tap in order to reset that. Now, under the HDR options, this is an authentic raw capture. So when you use it, Lightroom is going to combine the benefits of HDR as well as DNG RAW. So it automatically analyzes the scene, and then it determines the appropriate spread of exposure values, and it actually takes 3 images. Then it'll automatically align those 3 photographs, it'll de-ghost it, and it'll tone map it to create a 16-bit floating point DNG file. So the result is you're going to have a much larger dynamic range, a higher bit depth per color for a higher quality image. Now in a case like this, it doesn't really make sense because the dynamic range of this scene is quite low. Now we can see that I have 2 additional options, the long exposure and the depth capture. I'm just going to back out of here for a moment, tap on the gear icon, and then show you this is where I enabled those 2 options under technology previews. Now, depending on your mobile device will determine whether or not these are available. So if you don't see them here, it's just maybe that your device does not support them. All right, returning to our capture, I'm going to use the long exposure. You can see now that we can actually change the amount of seconds all the way up to 5. So we can take those long exposures and get either those light trails or that nice kind of cotton candy water. And we can also use the depth capture. That's going to capture in HEIC. That file format will then enable the capturing of a depth map, and you can use the range mask tool in Lightroom Classic on the desktop to apply selective adjustments based on that embedded depth information in that HEIC file. All right, for now, I'll just switch it back to professional, tap once in order to focus, and then tap to take the photograph. Now, once Lightroom takes that photograph, it's going to upload it to the cloud, and then it's going to synchronize it across my devices. If I go to all photos, we can scroll up to the top and we can see that image. If I wanted to go to auto, we can make an auto adjustment. When I return to all photos, Lightroom will go ahead and sync those edits that we've made to the image as well. Excellent. Now we need to return to the desktop to see how all of these images and the edits are synced between Lightroom Mobile and Lightroom on the desktop. So the first thing that I want to do is talk about the photograph that we took using Lightroom Mobile. Under all synced photographs in the catalog area, I will scroll down to the bottom so that we can see that image. So This image originated on my mobile device, and when that happens, the mobile device will upload that image, the full res file, to the cloud. Because Lightroom Classic has sync enabled, when you launch Classic on the desktop, it looks to the cloud, and if it sees any new images, or if it sees that any changes have been made to the files that have been synchronized, it will download and synchronize all of that data. So this image actually lives locally now, and in fact, if I right-click and choose Show in Finder, we can see that it is stored inside my Pictures folder. Just a word of caution here, you don't want to be moving your images around using the operating system. You want to make sure if you did want to move this image, you would move it by dragging and dropping it within Lightroom Classic. All right, so in the catalog panel, we can see our all synced photographs, and within the folder panel, we can also see our images. If I click on the iPhone header here, we can see that there have been 33 images imported. So all of these images of the ice also originated on my mobile device. Now, the reason that I have two headers for two different cameras here is because, if you remember, we actually recovered an image that had been deleted, and that image was taken on a different device. Now, if you prefer to have Lightroom Classic download all of the images that you capture on your mobile device or download to your mobile device to a different folder, you can choose the Preferences, and under Lightroom Sync, you can choose to specify a location for Lightroom synced images. And this would create a folder wherever you choose to create it, and then whenever Lightroom Classic saw a new image in the cloud, it would download it to that location instead of a separate location for each device. This is also a great way to check if there are any sync operations going on, because you can see the sync activity right here. All right, let's take a look at the collections area. We can see that there is a new collection set called From Lightroom Mobile, and if I click on the smoke collection, we can see that collection, or that album, that we created on the mobile device, as well as all of its contents. If I move back to the collection that I created earlier called Original and Edited, we can see the edits that were made to the image have been synchronized. And in fact, if I move to the Develop module, we can see here under History that they all are synchronized in one block called From Lightroom Mobile. Now, I have multiple From Lightroom Mobile edits here, and that's just because I ran through this presentation before I actually recorded it. So there you go. Now you know how to enable sync in Lightroom Classic so that you can sync photos and access them across your devices in order to organize, edit, and share your images. I'm Julianne Cost. Thanks for watching.